You'll be in good hands. Hi everyone, thanks for joining the Boston Office 365 User Group Remote Edition. For those of you that don't follow us or are not aware of all of our social campaigns, you can find those on our screen today. So diving right in, I am one of the organizers. My name is Dmitry Arapetov. I'm a partner at TrnDigital. Along with me, we have Mike Dixon, who's a senior consultant with Wallington Street Consulting. You can see him waving or fist bumping there on your screen. And we have Dave Pileggi, who's an Office 365 engineer over at Staples. So let's dive in. So for those that were not able to attend last week, we had a great presentation from Rachel Cooper. We are a little bit behind on posting former sessions on YouTube, but we are starting to crank through those now. So you can probably expect this to be up in the coming weeks. And we've also started publishing them as we move along. So let's talk about a bit of what's been updated in O365 since last time. There's been a lot of updates. We actually had to filter down about 73 or 74 updates down to a manageable amount in the next few slides. So this is by no means comprehensive, but it gives you an idea of what you may have missed if you blinked for at least a minute in the last month. So a couple of quick updates on Microsoft Teams. So the first thing is that the actual Teams meetings, such as the one that we're having right now, is being bumped up to having up to 300 attendees from the 250 that was there previously. And that rollout should be complete by the end of this month. And then for the actual Teams membership, you can have up to 10,000 Teams members, which was up from, I believe, 5,000 or so previously. So nice to see the ongoing limit increases. Last month, we talked about having the 9 video screens available, which you can see during this meeting today. And based on some blog posts, it looks like Microsoft's going to continue to expand that beyond 9 in the future. So next up, Microsoft is releasing a new feature for Exchange Online that allows administrators to give their users the ability to look at the quarantined messages and release them. So previously, if things were in quarantine, only an Exchange Online admin could sign in and actually see what's being quarantined and take action. This new feature puts more power in the end of users and hopefully would reduce the amount of tickets the Exchange admins need to take care of. So this is starting to roll out at the end of next month and expected to complete by the end of the summer. Another huge update is Exchange Online PowerShell V2 modules are now generally available. If you've ever had to use the Exchange Online PowerShell modules and you have multi-factor authentication, you probably ran into multiple different challenges. The first challenge being that it didn't work with version 1. To get it to work, you had to use Internet Explorer and you had to go through a song and dance through the admin center to get an MFA-friendly click-to-run application to work. With V2, we have native abilities now to use MFA. And in addition to all of the previous commandlets, there's about a number of additional new ones that Microsoft has also added. So if you have not yet upgraded your PowerShell to V2 for this, definitely take a look. I personally have got a lot of benefit out of this. So next is a pretty neat feature. We've all been in situations where we send a link to a SharePoint file, and not only does our email look messy because we have 2 lines of just a long URL that nobody can decipher, but a lot of times the people that you're emailing it to also might not have access to that file. So there's a new feature in Outlook now where if you include a link, it'll do a couple of things. One, it's going to shorten the URL and put an icon and just reduce it down to the file name that you're sharing. And second of all, it will do a real-time check to see if the audience of the email has access to that file. If they don't have access to the file, as you see in this picture, you also have the ability to either manage the access on that file to extend it beyond just who has access today, or you can attach it as a copy, which is sometimes helpful because everyone gets stuck in the loop of clicking a link, they don't have access, they click the request access within the site owner gets a request to accept it. There's a disconnect for why this person needs access. So this is going to soothe that whole process. And I already have this available in my tenant, as you can see from the screenshot. I think it's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Few updates with O365 groups. So as the current theme has been, things are being renamed to Microsoft instead of Office. So O365 groups are now going to be M365 groups, and all of the different UI elements, which extends to almost every single service under the umbrella of O365, will be updated by the end of the summer, and actually into the fall. There's also a cool new feature where you now have the ability to hide or rather determine whether O365 groups should be shown or hidden from Outlook in the address book. Previously, you had to run a PowerShell command to hide them because they were available by default. My understanding is more recently they're hidden by default, but you have the ability to enable them. But it was done using traditional methods of defining what's available in the global address book versus not. This now gives us the ability to actually specify this on a group level, and that could affect future compiled lists as well. So definitely looking forward to implementing this across our tenants. Another cool feature is for Microsoft Stream. So if anyone has ever recorded a Teams meeting, you probably know that it gets stored in Microsoft Stream. You now have the ability when you go to create content to be able to record your screen as opposed to recording a meeting. So this gives you that nice ability so that instead of having to record a meeting by yourself that has all of the attendees and everything else that a Teams meeting has, you can now do a clean recording of your screen, which is great for trainings and other scenarios. A few updates on SharePoint Online. So if you're using modern sites, you now have the ability to use audience targeting in the navigations, including in the footer and the hub navigations. This is a feature that's been long requested, so we're very happy to see that this is rolling out by the end of this month. There's also a new feature where you can schedule your SharePoint pages and news posts to be published at a future date. This was a feature of the classic publishing infrastructure, and we're glad to see that this is being brought forward to modern as well. Last update I want to highlight on SharePoint Online is this feature. It's a scenario that we've all run into. When we share a link to a Word file to a colleague, they click on the file to open it, and automatically the last modified version of the file happens to have their name associated to it. Because the file was opened in edit mode, and with autosave, every minor cursor move essentially saves a new revision. So this new review mode would give you the ability to share files, but when somebody goes to open them, it'll essentially open it in read-only mode, and they'd have to click an extra button to get into edit mode. So I know for people that pass around a lot of Word files and edit in the browser, this is going to be a welcome change for sure. Another feature that's pretty cool. So a lot of times there's news published that you have access to, but you never have time to read all of it. So now Microsoft will automatically send you a digest for all of the news posts that you have that have been posted that you have access to, but that you have not yet clicked into and read. So using the Microsoft Intelligence engines, this will be a curated selection of these posts that will be emailed to you. And when Microsoft first announced this a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of backlash online with a lot of administrators asking if there's a way to disable this feature. A lot of companies already have their own curated newsletters that they prefer to continue to use. So Microsoft has responded and will be adding the control via PowerShell. But we're not sure quite on the timing of the controls that are going to be released. I already know we have a few clients that are a little bit nervous about this, but from what I've seen, this seems like it's going to be a great addition to staying informed for. So thanks to TrnDigital for sponsoring this session as the platinum sponsor. And we can transition over into the main event for tonight. So we have Chris Bortlik from Microsoft, and he's got a great session planned for us today about getting ready for Project Cortex. So that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Chris. Chris, the floor is all yours.
All right, thanks, Dimitri. I'm going to go ahead and just share out my slides. All right, and the computer is telling me you all can see my screen. I just like to get a confirmation from a human, kind of old school like that. Everyone can see my slides. Awesome. All right, great. Well, I appreciate you all joining tonight. I appreciate being invited back. I've been a frequent flyer of the user group. Actually, was one of the original founders with Mike and Dimitri and others going back, 4 years or so ago? I think when we launched this group initially, so it's always a pleasure to come back and meet with you all. As Dimitri mentioned, my name is Chris Bortlik. I am a principal architect at the Microsoft Technology Center here in the Boston, Mass area. So I've been with Microsoft about 12 years, and my entire time has been focused around our productivity solutions like SharePoint and Office on premises, moved into BPOS and Office 365 around 7 years ago, and then joined the MTC full-time 4 years ago, and have been doing more and more around security, compliance, as well as business applications. I'm privileged to be part of what's known as the Insiders community, which is the internal version of the MVP program that many of you folks are aware of. And with that, get access to work closely with engineering on product strategy and roadmap and giving customer feedback. And one of those areas that I'm pleased to get to share with you all is some of the work we're doing around Project Cortex, which, fun fact, our good friend Chris McNulty, who's also from the Boston area, is one of the lead product managers out of Redmond, working on Project Cortex as well. So pleased to be able to share a lot of this on behalf of Chris and the product team. So one of the things that I did want to put out there, I know for many of us, this is certainly not our first online meeting. I know a lot of us, this is kind of our new normal due to COVID, and folks are doing a lot of Teams meetings and Zoom meetings and WebEx meetings, what have you. I did mention that we do a lot of remote technology center engagements, and these are just some fun little things that we've learned to share. So again, certainly this is not a full day session, so we won't be taking any long breaks, and it is kind of bring your own coffee, bring your own beer for SharePoint and all that. But again, if you do have any accommodations you need us to make, again, if we're going too fast or you lose the audio or the video, please let us know. I think most of you are using headsets already, which is great. Certainly it helps us to hear you better. Looks like some of you, I see Arthur, have turned on your video, so great to be able to see your faces. It's tough as a presenter to kind of know if people are listening, if they're falling asleep, if you've lost the audience. So appreciate it if you feel comfortable. As Dimitri mentioned, we are up to 9 video streams plus the presenter. And as we announced earlier this week, we're actually increasing the video streams to 7x7, which is 49, which will go into preview this summer and will be generally available before most students go back to school in the fall. So it's been a big request, not just from corporate customers, but also a lot of our education customers that are doing more and more with remote learning on Teams. So again, certainly please do feel comfortable turn on video. If you want, you can turn on a background blur or a background image. I'm showing what it's going to look like for the Patriots probably in September, which is a big empty stadium with hopefully some players on the field. But again, feel free to throw on a background image, whether it's a stock image, the blur, or as Mike's done, a custom image that has his logo in the background there as well. Please, if I haven't spoken with you in a bit, we'll be keeping an eye on the roster. So if I'm looking to my right, this is where I have a monitor with all of your beautiful faces. There is a raise hand feature in Teams, so if you haven't used that yet and you do want to get my attention and not necessarily interrupt during there, feel free to raise your hand in Teams or throw something in the chat window. But again, please do let us know if you have questions. We've got about 90 minutes or so I'll be looking down once in a while to my stopwatch. The other little tip is if I go like this, it's because I'm at home with my wife and 4 daughters, and I have a French door in the office, and that is my cue to say, please don't come in. And if you saw in the beginning, one of my daughters already came in while Dimitri was doing the intro because she was trying to log on to a dance thing on her iPad, and she needed the password to kind of get into her meeting. So do my best to try to stay focused on you all, but if you do see any of this, that is the sign to my wife and our lovely daughters. Another fun tip, today's my 20th wedding anniversary. So for the record, whether it's a good decision or not, I did decide to do this group meeting tonight. So I promised my wife I will try to wrap up in time to get back and spend a little bit of our anniversary together with her. But again, I couldn't turn down the opportunity to meet with you all. And again, after 20 years, it's an important anniversary, but we know there's plenty of time to get together and hopefully get outside this weekend. So with that, we're going to jump into the content. So this session that I'm presenting is actually something that Naomi Moneypenny, who's the engineering lead for Project Cortex, working with Chris McNulty, she actually delivered a session on this topic at the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon that I was also one of the presenters and producers of. So Joel Olson in the team ran a very large community event, about 10,000 people, about 2 weeks ago. The entire event was run via Microsoft 365 live events. We actually had 20 different parallel tracks. Each were different mile markers to kind of equate to a marathon. We had Jeff Teeper do the keynote. We had a bunch of different sessions with different product leaders. But Naomi actually delivered a session. So given that this product is not released yet, I always like to go with what the engineering teams tell me I can show. And knowing that Naomi presented it, I got her permission to leverage her screenshots and our content. And again, I'll obviously put my flavor and my spin on it. But this Project Cortex is not yet commercially available yet. I'll talk a bit about timeline, but there are unfortunately still some things that are NDA that I am not able to share on a public meeting like this. So it's certainly something that's not recorded. So I will share as much as I can. but just realize if there's some things I can't share, it's really just because the product has not become generally available yet. So some of the details around licensing and some specific things on capabilities, I am not able to share, but I'll share as much as I can while still maintaining my confidentiality agreement with Microsoft, which allows me to have an income to support my wife and our 4 daughters. So we'll try to kind of do our best to keep that in mind as well. So with that, just out of curiosity, it's a small enough group, there's around 20 or so folks. Just by using the raise hand feature, just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of Project Cortex already? How many of you have some information on Project Cortex? 6, 7, 8, 10. Cool. So around half of the audience. Great. Feel free to take your hand back down just so I don't lose whether or not you're asking a question. It's around half of you have heard of Project Cortex. So this is something that we announced back at Microsoft Ignite back in the fall. Project Cortex is really focused around 3 key pillars across Microsoft 365. The first area is around connecting people to knowledge, so helping people to identify shared topics, experts, and getting context around the work that we're doing across Microsoft 365. It's also leveraging some advanced artificial intelligence capabilities in the Microsoft Graph to help with categorization automation around processing content, whether it's digital content or even content today that might be paper-based, whether it's something that we're scanning in images, it might be something coming in via fax, coming in via email. I've been doing a lot of work with one of our partners, Fujitsu, who's actually working with us, with Sean Squires on the product team, around digitizing images and bringing in, again, faxing and scanning into the solution. And then it's also, of course, given that I work with large enterprise customers, many of which are in regulated industries. I see Deb out there as well. I know we do a lot with health and life sciences and pharma, and certainly financial services and government contractors and a variety of different industries. So certainly security and compliance are at its core as we're looking at Project Cortex. Now, Project Cortex is built on top of and extends a lot of the core content services that we've been doing across Microsoft 365 for the last 7 years. So it really is applying some additional capabilities on top of the good work we've been doing in SharePoint and services that have been dependent on SharePoint, such as OneDrive for Business, Microsoft Teams, anything built on top of Microsoft 365 groups, which now extend into Yammer as an example, are all contributors to the Project Cortex ecosystem. From an experiences perspective, again, it really starts off, it's focused initially around the content. But then with that, it's leveraging what was formerly known as the Office Graph, now the Microsoft Graph. And if you remember back 5-6 years ago, we introduced the Office Graph. We had a user experience we call Delve that is still out there. And Delve was a destination you had to go to in order to see what content was trending around you, what was the relationships between content and people. Project Cortex builds upon a lot of our learnings and understanding from Delve, from the Office Graph that has now been kind of elevated to what is now known as the Microsoft Graph. With that, we're really focused around knowledge as being a key pillar in Microsoft 365. So if you think about some of the key pillars we've had in the past around security and compliance and analytics and voice and all that, we're really elevating knowledge to be really a key discipline as part of Microsoft 365. We're trying to derive and share insights across the platform. So insights certainly are relationships through the graph. But you think about some of the work we've been doing for years around things like My Analytics and Workplace Analytics, where we've been able to glean, who's working with who and how much time are we spending on certain topics and what are the top trending things that are going on. So trying to give more visibility into the insights across the platform as well. So when we think about Project Cortex, some of the key scenarios that we're really targeting here is really around helping to work with ingesting and processing new content. Those content types could be formally structured things like forms, for example, an invoice, a purchase order, an HR onboarding form, an agreement, a statement of work, a legal document. But it's also looking at how do we work with existing content that might already exist in Microsoft 365, web pages in SharePoint, email conversations in Outlook, Teams conversations, Yammer conversations, but also looking at extending it into connected data and some of the work and investments we've been doing around Microsoft Search, as well as the connector framework to over time enable us to enrich the graph with non-Microsoft content sources. I was with a customer today that we actually spent a lot of time talking about their on-premises file servers, some of their work they're doing with legacy content management systems like OpenText as an example. So how do we actually potentially connect into and bring in outside content into Microsoft Search, into the Microsoft Graph to, again, also enforce and enrich some of the information that we're seeing in the graph as well. So at a high level, from a logical architecture perspective, Microsoft 365 is bringing together, as you know, Office 365, which is SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams and Yammer, the Office clients. It's also leveraging our security and compliance capabilities in our Windows desktop client. But one of the big investments that we've made and really been a big focus area for us has been the idea around Microsoft Search. Microsoft Search has been there for a while. Today it's exposed really if you log into bing.com with your Azure Active Directory credentials. And we realize that not everyone goes to Bing as a destination. You might be using other search engines. So what we've been doing is working to promote the Microsoft Search bar to be the consistent search experience. So if you're in SharePoint and you're searching in SharePoint or in OneDrive, we elevate the search box from in the SharePoint page up into that sweep bar, up into the nav bar. Over time, you're going to see us replace the search experience in Teams, in Yammer, in Outlook, in the actual Office clients, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint. So we actually have one search box that's going against one index. And the index could be content in Microsoft 365, but it also could be into content that you're indexing from outside of the platform. So it's really a key thing that we're working on, is that when someone is searching for content, they often don't remember, was that on my OneDrive? Was that a conversation I saw in Teams? Was it something in my email? I shouldn't know. I shouldn't have to care where that content lives, right? If I'm an average user, I'm not a technologist, as most of us are on this call, I just want search to work, right? But I also want search to be contextually aware, to know that if I'm inside of SharePoint, maybe the default search scope should be for the content in that site, but give me the ability to branch out beyond that if I want to. Now, Project Cortex is then going to build in some new page templates, new site templates that look for things like what we're calling topic cards, and you'll see some examples of this in a little bit. Building out topic pages, building out a knowledge center and a content center to really help you get visibility around that. Now, as I mentioned, it's building on top of building blocks like the Microsoft Graph, but it's also building on top of investments we've been making over the last 5 or 6 years in Azure as a platform. So think about what we've been able to do to scale Microsoft Teams, to add millions and millions of users over the last 3 months due to COVID and everyone working from home. Think about that, that's kind of infrastructure and platform services. But you think about what Azure has had for things around cognitive services, for speech to text, for optical character recognition, for image processing, for some of the other building blocks that are there. Some of the work we've done in the Power Platform around things like AI Builder to allow you to train models to look for mapping data elements in fields from forms and actually promoting that as metadata. Project Cortex is building a user experience on top of things that are in Azure, like the cognitive services, like Lewis for language understanding and intent. And it's making it easier for what I call average humans, knowledge managers, folks that aren't data scientists, that aren't used to going in and building these complex models and entities inside of Lewis. It's trying to democratize knowledge management for the regular folks like myself and others that aren't necessarily Azure developers. So again, it's building upon that platform. As I mentioned, it's then leveraging Microsoft Search to certainly leverage the content that's there, always honoring security and compliance settings you might have around data loss prevention, retention policies, security trimming, again, leveraging some of the built-in intelligence for computer vision for, again, scanning in images and doing OCR and image recognition, building upon the foundation we've had around managed metadata and actually giving a boost to the managed metadata service and some of the content types and some of the content type syndication, some of the challenges we've had historically with some of those services. You're going to see some investments there. And then enabling you to use the graph and some of the content connectors to start to bring in and ingest external content sources. So today, Microsoft Search, we ship with, I think, 6 or 7 different Microsoft first-party connectors to things like file servers, ServiceNow, MediaWiki. And then there are a ton of partners like BA Insight and some of the others we've worked with that have built over 100 different connectors today to enable you to connect to non-Microsoft data sources that then connect through the graph and pump the information into Microsoft Search. So at a high level, that's kind of the logical architecture of what Project Cortex is doing. Now, as we think about content understanding, again, it's really focused around ingesting and processing digital content, but also, again, looking at realizing a lot of our processes today especially in industries, again, like healthcare and financial services. There's still a good amount of paper-based processes. David, I know you're out there at Staples, and my wife and kids are, I swear, keeping you all in business right now, printing things. So they're getting their online assignments, and they're constantly printing. We're constantly going to Staples to get more and more paper to keep printing. So I know there's still a lot of things that, the printed document is great, but I know Staples has been doing more and more to kind of digitize their business and their offerings as more and more people want to get things from paper into a digital format to make it easier to retain and discover and share, especially when we're not physically in the office and we can't physically be passing those papers around to get review and approval and sign off. So a big focus around that as well. So I kind of talked about these three key pillars. And again, one of the additional layers, as I mentioned, is building upon the foundation that we've had in SharePoint around the managed metadata service, taxonomy, and content types as a core concept. But as you're going to see, we're trying to promote taxonomy and tagging to not just be a SharePoint construct, to start to again elevate that to be a Microsoft 365 suite-wide service, so we can start to tag people with skills. We can start to tag conversations, tag content in Outlook, tag content in Yammer posts. So not just have tagging being done at the page or the document level, which is very much a SharePoint construct. Again, making that more easily accessible to other content types, even if they're not documents that live inside of a SharePoint library. So Project Cortex, as I mentioned, is really focused around helping with aiding the classification of content. We're trying to streamline things through, again, some of the building blocks that have been in the Power Platform, like Power Automate, which, as folks know, is the new name for Microsoft Flow. And you think about Flow and Power Automate being the successors to SharePoint workflows and SharePoint Designer-based workflows. So again, elevating that, certainly giving the ability to apply manually or automatically security and compliance labels. So when we think about tagging of content, I typically think about it in three buckets. There's typically three reasons, at least, why we tag content. Reason number one is what we're talking about tonight, which is around knowledge and search and discovery, making it easier for humans to find things and reuse things. And Camille, is that a margarita? I'm so jealous. I love margaritas. I was going to swear, I'm on my butt after two of them, to be candid, but I do love a good margarita, so enjoy that. So it's really, again, tagging content for knowledge management, but it's also tagging it typically for security and compliance. So when I want to label a document, maybe I'm labeling it as being confidential. And if it's labeled as confidential, I'm going to put a header, a footer, a watermark, an encryption policy. The third reason why we often tag content is for data governance. My colleague Kat is on the line. She and I do a lot of work together. Kat's based in the New York MTC. We did a session with a large customer recently, really focused around records management and knowledge management. And as we tag content, how do we drive disposition policies and archive and retention policy? So those are kind of the three main reasons why I see people tagging content. And again, we really want to evolve and modernize the way we deal with metadata and taxonomy catalogs. Not only that, but also giving the ability, as there are industry standard term sets, if there are industry standard terms in pharmaceuticals or healthcare or disciplines like HR or IT, maybe give you the ability to ingest standard term sets, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel and manually build those term sets for yourself. Ingest an industry standard set of terms, and then give you the ability to edit, add, remove, make synonyms. Again, get a head start on building in some of your terms in your taxonomy catalog. And again, once we get that content ingested, enable us to easily extract and then promote some of the pieces of information that might be inside of a PDF, promote those as columns that then become metadata that we can then do sorting and filtering and drive workflow off of, do some conditional formatting to give us some visibility into trends, again, without requiring a human to necessarily go in and edit all of the optional or required fields in the SharePoint library to get the metadata actually enriched and shown up. So here's that logical architecture again. So as we think about organizing of content, really when we think about it, there's really four levels of content. Microsoft has a big focus on artificial intelligence. We also have a big focus around ethical AI. Again, making sure that as we're training data sets, we're doing it in a way that doesn't have any implicit biases or explicit biases based on the data that we're training with. We also want to make sure and realize that we see AI as augmenting humans, not necessarily replacing humans. There are some things that AI can do really, really well because AI doesn't get tired like a human, So think about if I'm looking through multiple documents repetitively, I might get tired, I might get fatigued because there's only so much that my brain can take or my eyes can take before I start making mistakes. AI, once it's trained properly, doesn't really have those barriers. A machine, so long as it's got enough capacity, compute and storage, can continue to process around the clock without some of the limits that we see as humans. But we definitely see humans continue to play a role in manual labeling and classifying of content, but that can be labor intensive, especially if you have large amounts of data. So what we want to see is a world where we get into a combination of machine learning and machine teaching. So with machine teaching, we can have subject matter experts go in and train the model and say, well, for this form, these are the fields that I as a human think are the right, and the machine can say, well, I've been trained enough, here's my confidence level that I've got it right or not. And then a human over time can continue to reinforce the learning. If the machine gets it wrong, give it negative reinforcement. So oftentimes you'll see things on websites and elsewhere where it says, well, was this helpful, yes or no? That again is an example of positive reinforcement if you give it a yes, or negative reinforcement to say, no, you got it wrong when you give it a no. So we're always training these AI models by giving it our feedback to say, you got it right or you got it wrong. And that's reinforcing it either as a positive example or a negative example. The other thing we might see is there might be some cases where we don't have things structured well enough and we can only partially automate it. So a classic example I see where it's very difficult for a machine to deal with processing is things where the document format might vary a lot. So two common examples is maybe you're a supplier like Staples, right? In Staples, you have a lot of people that you purchase things from. When you're receiving invoices from those third parties, you really can't control the format of the invoice they're going to send you. And you might have 20, 30, 50 different suppliers that you're getting things from. Now, maybe you build a model because maybe their invoices are consistent for each of the vendors and you can build a model for each of them. Compare that to if you're the one sending out the invoice or you're the one creating the form, that is pretty well structured because you own the form, right? So you pretty well can control what that form is going to look like. Another common example where things are very difficult is you think about it in the legal realm. Statements of work as consultants, you think about agreements and legal contracts. I worked with a company that does tower services that they sell to cell phone carriers. They wanted to have a process where they could take a bunch of documents, take their contracts, rip through all the contracts and pull out information related to what are our terms? How long is the lease on the tower? What are our payment terms? What's the dollar amount? That's very, very difficult to do because every time you go to a lawyer, they probably have their own contract, their own SOW. Even your own in-house legal counsel may or may not use the same template for the different contracts they might draft. So it's not an easy problem to solve. The last thing is that there are a lot of things that we've learned over time to be able to do things. So for example, you look at what we're doing with Stream. Stream having the ability to go speech to text. If I wanted to, I could have turned on the PowerPoint live captioning or the captioning inside of Teams where we can do speech to text. And we've gotten really, really good at getting close to human parity with the machine doing speech to text, doing language translation, doing optical character recognition for things like business cards and receipts, having the ability again to translate things across different languages. So machines are getting, in many cases, closer and closer to human parity, but in some cases they're actually exceeding the human's ability to do things just because, again, the machines don't have some of those biases built in unless we train them to have them, as well as they don't get fatigued. So again, what we're trying to take, again, a lot of these different concepts that, again, we've had in the Azure platform around form processing, object detection, and some of the other capabilities we've then built into the Power Platform, and again, raise that up a level with Project Cortex. Make sense so far? All right, I'm going to take a quick sip. Camila, it is not alcohol. This is not vodka. You don't want to see me on a little bit of vodka. Or maybe you do, but I don't want to be on recording when I'm drinking a margarita or something a little bit stronger. So as we think about things, I'm going to spend a lot of time now talking about document understanding and some of the different models that we're building, whether it be for some of the cases where we're taking those unstructured documents like contracts, cases where we have more structured documents like an invoice where we can train things. And I'm going to kind of walk you through a couple of the examples. Again, I do have this running in live environments. Some of these things have changed since the screenshot, so I have access to pre-release builds. So I'm sensitive to kind of show things from the Microsoft environment because some of these things are not available yet. And again, I want to be careful about violating my NDA by showing you things that we have access to as Microsoft employees. So I'm going to stick to the screenshots that Naomi has kind of approved. Says she's the product manager, so I'm going to kind of go with hers, with her documents here. So again, an example again with the form processing. So I'm going to walk you through an example in a bit. But again, having integration directly with AI Builder through Power Automate directly attached to a SharePoint document library. And I'm going to show you an example of some of the training that we can do around things like purchase orders and invoices to, again, over time, then start to monitor those document libraries and then promote those elements from the document, the image, the PDF, and then actually promote them as metadata that, again, can be used for sorting and filtering and searching and for business process automation through workflow. So I'm going to take a quick peek here at the chat window, just make sure I haven't missed anything. Good. I see Deb loves it, so thank you. I think that was more in line with the margarita than anything I said, but I'll take it as a compliment nonetheless. Thanks, Deb. So again, Project Cortex, again, building on the metadata foundation, being consistent across all of Microsoft 365, not just being a SharePoint construct, rather, giving a consistent tagging experience with suggestions where, again, the machine can make recommendations to a human. Humans can make recommendations to other humans. Again, discovery based on enterprise terms and enterprise content. And again, making it easier to build models that are reusable across the tenant as well. So this is a view into some stuff that's actually starting to release to some of your tenants. So if you have tenants that are in targeted release or first release, and you go into the modern SharePoint experience, there's a node there, I think it says Content Services, where you can start to access the new Managed Metadata Service. So historically, it was the classic SharePoint 2010, 2013-esque term store we're navigating, which really hadn't gotten a lot of love in a while. It's been modernized with the new modern user experience to make it easier for people to manage the term store, access the content type gallery, as well as making it easier for people that are tagging content to more easily discover and use those terms, even if they're nested terms, to again apply the terms consistently, as well as sort and filter and search based on them as well. So again, taking a lot of the stuff that had been in the classic admin experience, the classic list and library experience, and then promoting them into the modern experience as well. Another great thing that we're doing is, just like we've been doing around security and compliance, giving visibility into which of our terms are actually being used. So are people actually using the terms that are out there? How many term sets have been closed? Which terms may or may not have synonyms, right? Certain terms, there might be other words that could be closely related to that term. So how do we define that glossary of synonyms to, again, help people with making sure they're using the right term consistently? As well as, again, having some modern capability that supports pushing out content types to hub sites, right? As we've moved away from having a lot of subsites rather, and I know Dan Holmes has been very strong about, subsites are not a good thing. If you look at the modern architecture we're doing around communication sites, you look at how Microsoft Teams and anything based on Microsoft 365 groups, they're all creating their own top level site. And then hub sites are being that way that we can relate related sites and then have a loose coupling to move those sites around. Well, wouldn't it be great if I had an HR hub site that had multiple sites connected to it around recruiting and benefits, what have you? Wouldn't it be great if I could push the content types to the HR hub site and then have it proliferate that to the member sites that are joined into the hub? So you're going to see more and more ability to push the content types, not just to specific site collections, but also to hubs. And then the hubs know the relationship with their related sites. And then the ability to enforce those and push them down to the document libraries, inclusive of new libraries that might get created inside of that site after the content type was pushed down to it. So as we think about content understanding, it's really helping our organization to extract what's important across documents. And I used a few examples before around invoices, proposals, legal agreements. You're going to see that exposed through the new Content Center templates, the ability to build your own models for structured forms, as well as the ability to build models for unstructured documents. And the way we'll be doing it is really through things that are becoming more and more familiar to us, things like workflows and Power Automate, the ability to apply things consistently through a SharePoint site design, and new APIs that are being built and will be exposed soon around taxonomy APIs. So if you're a developer, if you're an ISV, if you're a partner, and you want to apply taxonomy through the APIs, maybe through a PowerShell script, through an application that you're building to do migration, giving you the ability to leverage the taxonomy APIs to read and write the taxonomy as appropriate as well. So we did announce back at Microsoft Build about a month or so ago, the taxonomy APIs as part of the Microsoft Graph are now in public preview. So if you do want to take a peek at the Graph APIs for taxonomy, there's a link to that. I will publish these slides probably later tonight or tomorrow out on my SlideShare, and I'll tweet them out as well. So if you want to grab the deck and grab the links, again, I'll make these available to you all. But do know that the Graph APIs for the taxonomy service are in preview now. From a high level, again, we've got more content, but kind of just closing out on this first piece. Again, the Microsoft Graph is already out there. It's been available for a while. The SharePoint framework, the patterns and practices, the PMP that Vesa and Mark Anderson and Julie Turner and others in the community have been embracing and building components in, that is out there, and that continues to be a great open source project. Microsoft Search and its extensibility, that is something that is out there today, including the ability to use Microsoft first-party connectors, as well as some connectors from partners like BA Insight and Raytheon and Accenture and others that have been building connectors for Microsoft Search. And then some of the core plumbing and the services that we're building on top of have already been available in Power Automate, in Azure, the Form Recognizer and Computer Vision. And again, Project Cortex is building upon the foundation of things that have already been built in Power Platform and in Azure. But again, it's packaging them up in a way that makes it easier for someone to just leverage them directly inside of Microsoft 365 without requiring you to stitch these things together. Now, what's coming soon is Project Cortex will be generally available soon. I can safely tell you that the soon is the summer. I can't be more specific than summer, but Chris and Naomi have both said that Project Cortex will be generally available this summer. The taxonomy APIs and the content type APIs will also be available soon in that same time frame. And then things that will be coming later, and later typically think in the next like 6 to 12 to 18 month time frame, will be additional APIs around knowledge and knowledge management, as well as some component controls. So you think about, we're going to have new site templates around Knowledge Center and topics, having new web parts and controls that you can then use on other pages as components is something else that's top of mind as well. So I'll just pause for a second. Again, I see a lot of head nodding. Any questions so far? Are things going pretty well? Folks tracking? Okay, cool. We've got about 55 minutes or so we're doing pretty well as far as content. And I want to make sure we save plenty of time, certainly at the end, once you kind of digest everything, see if there's other questions as well. So as we think about the next part of this journey, it's not just about documents and document processing. It's really about connecting people to topics and connecting people and topics to expertise. And one of the things that's been a big challenge historically has been exposing and mining conversations. There's a lot of institutional knowledge today that is not just in a document. It's inside of a chat in Teams. It's inside of a Yammer post. It's inside of an email in Outlook. Another big thing we've been working on is driving consistency of things like the people card across the platform. So if I'm looking at, Arthur's card, I've got one consistent experience that shows me everything about Arthur, his skills, where he's in the org chart, whether I'm viewing his card in Outlook, in Teams, and Yammer. So really a big focus over the years has been around getting consistency across the platform of things like the people card. This is one of the new concepts coming soon around what we call a topic card. I'm going to drill into this in a little bit more. So here's a case where we're doing a private chat with, in this case, Emily. And you notice these phrases, these words are actually underlined. What this is an example where Project Cortex has identified that these are actual concepts. And if I hover over these, what it actually gives me is that topic card. So it's contextually aware that this project core or this term Mark 8 are actually related to this concept around construction operations reliability. People can follow that topic, that concept. They can suggest and edit to a human. So there'll be some new roles that are being introduced around kind of a knowledge manager role. You think about that historically has been like a librarian type function, a content type owner or manager. So there'll be a couple of new roles. One is the admin experience for managing some of this, but also the more business facing role as kind of a knowledge manager. You'll see here that that person could then review the suggestion. You'll see where the source of it was coming from. You also then get related content. What are the people that might have that as part of their profile? What are the resources in the documents that might also be related to this concept as well? It also then gets exposed. Here's an example of a knowledge center page. So here's the actual topic page around the Project Core, the acronym. And as I go into this topic in the Knowledge Center, you notice that it's showing me all of the related people that have this concept. And as I zoom out, it will show me the related resources, the related documents, how many people have viewed this, how many people gave us a thumbs up that this was helpful. It's almost like the old ratings concept. Remember back in the ratings inside of SharePoint and the conversations and all that, to be able to say, hey, was this useful or not? So giving us that feedback that, this document has been viewed 85 times, 24 people found it helpful. It's been mentioned as a topic 9 times. So again, giving us additional signals and context around the usefulness of the content that we're finding. Another thing that I really, really love is this knowledge graph. Right, so you think about the Microsoft Graph, and you think about things like Delve. For some users, that's very much of an abstract concept. So having the ability to go in here and get this visual representation, these are the different topics. These things that are in the dark gray here are curated topics. The things that are in white are topics that are suggested. And you notice these lines in the weighting. So this dotted line is showing us that this is a suggested connection between these topics and these nodes, versus the hard line might be a connection that's been made, and the thickness of the line designates the confidence level, the strength that we see inside of the connection. So this is a really neat way of people building with these knowledge maps or these mind maps to start to navigate and traverse the related terms. Much like as a DBA, I might have had a entity relationship diagram showing me the relationship between tables within a database and the relationship between those data entities, giving us visibility, again, with some level of confidence on how confident we are that there's a relationship between these different terms. So right in this case, we look at flight operations, and then Delta might be a carrier, United might be a carrier. So again, giving us all the related terms to let us navigate the information in a bit more of a visual fashion. If we go back to the knowledge page and we zoom into my topics, again, giving me visibility into topics that my colleagues might be experts in, or my colleagues might be following. So again, concepts that have been there inside of Delve of, looking at following people, following documents, in this case, looking at topics that are trending around the organization. But again, all being built upon that foundation of security trimming. Right? We realize that different people in the company may need or may not have access to certain things. So again, if your company is going through a merger or an acquisition, or there's legal terms, or there's things going on in HR around changes to benefits, et cetera, those are terms that maybe shouldn't be available to the general population. Those things should be security trimmed and don't even show the topic if it's not something that somebody can access. So certainly building upon the foundation we've had around security trimming of content and topics. But again, giving us visibility into the different topics, the number of views, who's following it, how often it's been changed, kind of why this card is being suggested to you. Again, giving you a very rich experience to kind of, again, visualize some of the trending topics related to your colleagues, as well as things that are trending around you in the organization as a whole. This is an example, again, as we drill in, looking at different types of content. So looking at news from a SharePoint site, Dimitri was talking about some of the work we're doing around announcements and reminders to make news more discoverable. So as you post news and announcements, again, bubbling those up inside of this, bubbling up pages and other related content as well. So we showed you the ability to show topics inside of Teams. We're also applying the same concept inside of email. So in this case, I'm using Outlook on the web. And again, I have an email message. In this case, that same concept, that same topic of core has been highlighted. And just like you saw in Teams, hover over it, I get that same topic card, that same user experience, regardless of the context of where that term is being shown to me as well. Then I hover over a person. In this case, I'm hovering over Nestor. And as I bring up his people card, you'll notice information we've seen before, who he reports to. But you notice there's another note here showing me some of the skills and the topics that have been added to his profile as well. So as I zoom into Nestor, you'll see that he's been tagged as an expert in Mark 8 in construction operations. So you're going to see more and more of the ability to have us suggest topics to you. You think about what we've been doing for a while on things like LinkedIn, where LinkedIn will recommend maybe you add these topics to your colleagues might recommend you add a topic. Having the same sort of capability where the machine might suggest a topic to you. Looks like, Paul, you have your hand up there. Do you have a question? Feel free to come off mute if you want, or I see a couple of questions in the chat. So Paul, why don't you kind of go first? So is your question, would it capture lowercase as the project as well? Can you come off mute, maybe give me some context there?
We're using the word core.
In this example? Yeah, this is the word core. So was the question, is it case sensitive or not?
Correct, because a lot of project names are common words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it can be case sensitive. The other thing that we find a lot, at least in large companies like Microsoft, sometimes the acronym of the word is actually overloaded, meaning we reuse the same acronym with multiple different definitions in the company. So it also becomes context aware as well. Let's see, going back here, I see a few questions. Let me scroll back real quick. Auto metadata, will there be some sort of certification for a Project Cortex admin? Andre, not sure yet, but I know we continue to look at the certifications and the training. Topic cards, Mike, I don't know if it's using the same framework as the adaptive cards and the fluid framework, so I'm not sure exactly how they're building that. Let's see, this does not, Greg, this does not replace Delve or Sway. So Delve is still a different kind of experience, and Sway is really more focused around content creation, very much like a Prezi or Word Online. So Sway will still exist there. David, yeah, initially I was showing it in OWA. Over time, I'm going to show you an example around this being inside of the rich Office clients as well. Organizations in the preview. So I'm going to get to that, Andre, in a second. We're already in the fourth wave of preview. So Project Cortex is going to be generally available this summer. So we've kind of taken the last set of preview customers, but I'm going to give you information at the end of some of the office hours that we've been doing. And last I checked, there were, I want to say, around 20 or 30 different companies that are actually in the private preview that have been testing and giving us feedback above and beyond Microsoft as well. So I think I cleared most of the backlog of questions. So thanks for the questions. Christine, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. Hi. I actually unveiled my video, so it doesn't look like you're talking to a beach. Though, no, I'm not at the beach. Wish we were, though.
Likewise.
Quick question on the taxonomic terms, especially in the graph. The relationships, is there an option to develop either one-to-many, many-to-one, one-to-one, and so forth?
Yeah, good question. Let me go back to that visual that was here. I think this was where.
Synonyms.
Yep, synonyms. Yep. So definitely there is still the ability to do synonyms inside of the term store. But when we go back to, I think this was the visual we were talking about. So I haven't looked. It's a good question. I don't know. It looks like in this case, this same term, Mark 8, has multiple relationships going into it. So it looks like in the case there are some of the one-to-ones, but there's also a relationship in a one-to-many concept as well. Yep. Cool. All right. Good questions. Not surprised, given this audience. And it's so nice to see so many familiar faces. I was saying to David and Mike and Dimitri before, I'm really grateful that this community has continued to do these online meetings. I know it's so hard for a lot of us that are used to being together and meeting up once a month or having SharePoint Saturday or Teams Thursday to not have this. So I appreciate the community coming together because it's just so great to be able to see a lot of your faces and connect with you all again. All right. So again, here's that example I was going through before, and I think I was on Nestor's profile. Cool. So this is an example, David, around the thick client. In this case, this is actually leveraging Word. So in this case, it's Word Online as well. But the idea is that this will also come into the Office clients. So in this case, as I'm hovering over Project Core inside of Word, in this case, Word Online, it's giving me the ability to do a smart lookup, just like how I today can go out and look things up on like Wikipedia or something else and use that smart lookup capability. In this case, it's doing a lookup within my organization, and it found that Project Core has a topic card, and it's bringing that information in for me as well. So even in the other Office clients beyond just email. So the other thing we'll be doing, I'll let this kind of do its little animation there, but adding a knowledge bot So if you want to suggest topics to the knowledge base, some people might want to actually just chat with the bot, have it submit it there, and then again, a human can get notified. A human can review it and say, gee, it's great that Dana went ahead and made a suggestion. Maybe Deb's the owner. Deb reviews and says, you know what, I appreciate your suggestion, but it really isn't applicable in this concept. So a human can still go through and do some review and curation of that as well. So here's an example of how it's being applied in a SharePoint concept. So as many of you know, Microsoft for a while has been doing live events. I know, David, you've done some sessions around how Staples been leveraging broadcast and live events as well. Well, Microsoft, as you probably know, has our CEO connection, where Satya Nadella, our CEO, has a regular town hall meeting that he and his leadership team run over live events. And as you probably know, we recently boosted the limit from 10,000 to 100,000 people in a live event due to the surge due to COVID. Well, Satya also has a Yammer community for CEO Connection. There's also a page on our intranet where the leadership team can engage with others across Microsoft. So in this case, we're looking at this leadership connection page that might exist on our intranet. And again, as you'd expect, again, someone put the comment of wiki, wiki, wiki. It's just like a wiki type page. And as I hover over this page inside of the SharePoint site, there's that same topic card being brought up to, again, show that information coming from a SharePoint page without someone manually having to go through and wire up the page links to the wiki page and all that. Again, dynamically discovering that and, again, enabling a human to kind of clean that up and accept or reject the recommendations as well. So here's an example. Again, we're looking at the Knowledge Center. We're seeing the people. Again, as you'd expect, hovering over the person, there's that same, person card with their skills. So again, whether it's in email, whether it's in SharePoint, the point I hope you're hopefully seeing is there's been a lot of thought to having consistency of user experience of topic cards, of people cards. So it's not a jarring experience as I go from, Teams to SharePoint to Yammer to the Office clients. We really want to have a consistent user experience across all of our endpoints. Looks like there's another comment in the chat. Let me just take a quick peek at that. Oh, excellent. Thank you, David. All right. So again, looking at the page, you can follow the tag. We can look at the suggestions that are there. As I look at this page further, you notice here's an example where Lynn, who's the persona that's logged in the screenshot, she's seeing, just like you do on LinkedIn, recommendations where the engine is saying, hey, we noticed that you're doing a lot of work on this topic, or maybe someone suggested that you might be an expert in this. We recommend maybe you add this to your profile. And again, if you do add it or you reject it, that's another signal back to the graph. Again, very similar to what we're used to as consumers with LinkedIn, and it's taking some of our learnings that we've had through the LinkedIn acquisition. So again, really trying to, again, give us more of that consumer type experience. The other thing we recently announced is the ability to leverage the graph to enable you to populate attributes on the user's profile. So that's been a challenge in the past, to be able to add skills and interests and other things programmatically to someone's profile. So that is something we recently announced as well, is the ability to actually access some of the properties through the graph as well, to again put some of your own attributes in there, in your skills and interests. So again, here's Lynn looking at this. She can see the recommendation. She could choose to accept that or reject that as well. So the next part, again, is going a little bit deeper around the content processing capabilities. And again, I talked about how it's building upon the AI services that are available inside of Azure, as well as some of the things that we've been doing through AI Builder. Let's see, there's a question here around the market segment, small, mid-sized companies. So Pooja, I cannot share, I think you may not have been here at the outset, I cannot share the licensing. That's not public yet. And again, I love my job and my supporting my family with it, so I can't share anything on the licensing right now, but I can tell you when I go through the Project Cortex office hours, there is a session planned, I believe it's in August, after this becomes GA, where the product team is going to go through some of the building the business case for Project Cortex, and some of that I'm sure we'll talk about where we think customers might see the most value. Again, I typically work with enterprise customers where they're 1,000 to 5 to 10 to 100,000 employees, like Microsoft. So see a lot of value in very, very large organizations with terabytes and terabytes of data. Not to say that this can't be applied to smaller organizations, but again, where I spend most of my time is with really, a small customer to me is usually anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000, and I'm often dealing with customers 100 to 200,000 employees or more is kind of the space that I tend to play in. So again, we talked a lot about the manual capabilities. We got through some of the automation. And again, I'm going to go into some of the examples where we're going to show you the combination of machine learning and machine teaching. So content processing. So this is an example again of that content center. And what you're seeing here is the number of files that might have been processed successfully, the ones that may not have been processed yet. You're seeing some trends around over time. How successful are we at the tagging and the classification? And you can also see for the different entities that we built, how confident the engine thinks that it is in terms of its training. So taking a quick step back, Microsoft for a while has had a capability called Advanced eDiscovery. It was an acquisition we made a few years ago of a company called Equivio. And what Equivio Advanced eDiscovery has done for legal customers, it allows people to reason over large amounts of data and then say whether or not that document, that email, that file is relevant or not relevant to a legal matter. So lawyers have had the ability for years to go through and train the model to say, this document applies to this case, this document doesn't apply to the case. And over they go through it, and the engine will eventually say, look, you've trained this about as far as you're going to get. You're at like 95%. You can keep training us and giving us relevant and non-relevant documents, but you're basically past the point of a kind of a diminishing return there. Same sort of concept here where it says, look, based on the number of documents you've given us, we feel like we have enough to have a high level of confidence that we can successfully classify the content. But maybe over time things change and you may need to go back and do some kind of retraining of the model. So again, it's giving you basically a confidence score of how confident we think the engine's going to be. So in this case, I've got a document library. We go ahead and maybe we go ahead and grab a bunch of documents, PDFs, images, what have you, upload them into the document library. And then this goes out and it pulls in the documents, and then it's going to extract, and you're going to see how this was done in a second, and it promotes the pieces of information from those documents, from those images, actually extracts them as metadata, and then promotes the metadata as columns that are then exposed in the document library. Here's an example again of the purchase order scenario I was talking about earlier. In this case, the way this is done is you're going to see tight integration. So today, you might have the Automate tab where you're accessing Power Automate or Flow. There'll be some additional capabilities to directly access AI Builder, which again is part of the Power Platform today, but again, directly wiring this up into SharePoint Online. So you go ahead and click on, say, I want to build my model. In this case, the model is specific to purchase orders. When I go through, it says, okay, well, give me usually 5 or more documents that are representative examples of that purchase order. As we do that, it then goes and says, you know what, based on what we've done by looking at 5 to 10 different documents, we're 66% confident that this element is a vendor. And it's in this case, you see the label is vendor, and it knows that the field underneath that should be the vendor. Then you can go through and you can say, you know what, well, these are some of the things that you didn't find. I think that this should be the date field. So it's a combination of the machine saying, we recommend that you tag this and you can review and edit it if it got it wrong. And there might be some things that it just couldn't get that you as a human can go in and draw basically a little box around it and then say, well, this is the date. So it's, again, it's a combination of recommendations from the engine with you as a human being able to pick your own tags from the document. You go ahead and you select those fields. You choose whether or not you want to promote them or not. So in this case, maybe the phone number, the second phone number, maybe you don't want to promote that as a piece of metadata. Maybe it's not reliable, it's not applicable, what have you. You go through, you do that. Now that model is attached to that library. So now any new documents that land in this purchase orders document library, automatically when the document gets uploaded, will kick off that workflow, which then has a connection to the AI Builder model that you just trained, and then it knows to then process it and then promote that information as metadata. So in this case, we're going to grab a bunch of PDFs that look like that purchase order. We're going to drop them into the document library, kicks off the workflow. The workflow then comes back, and again, it promotes those elements that it pulled out of the PDF, promotes them as metadata, and that metadata, again, at that point is just metadata attached to the SharePoint document library. So human still has the ability to edit it, to change it, to update it, etc. And it looks like there is a question. Christine, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thanks, Chris. Quick question, because this is all looks very similar in terms of the AI model in Power Apps. So if you've already trained Power Apps on X number of documents, can that same model be basically reused in Project Cortex?
Yeah, so this is exactly, it's a great point. This is exactly the AI builder capability that's in Power Platform today, which, as you know, is not as tightly integrated with SharePoint. As far as I know, and this could change, I don't think that you will be able to take an existing AI builder model and connect it to the library. I could be wrong there. The other thing that the last I checked, and again, this is always subject to change, is that these models that we're creating today, I believe, are connected to a specific library. So if we build this PO model for this document library, today it cannot be reused across multiple libraries. It's something that I know they're looking at. But as far as I recall, you cannot bring in existing AI builder models. And once you create a model, it's attached to that library. And you can only have one model per library is the other common thing people bring up. So someone say, well, what if I created 2 AI builder models for the same document library? The last I checked, it's really just one model per library. So the other example is something where the documents may not be as well structured, right? So I talked about if it's an invoice or a contract where you own that document, that format, again, it's easier to go through and train it. Oops, looks like there's another question. Paul, go ahead.
Just a quick thing with the one, so basically with a library, you can only train it to automate one thing.
So yeah, so building that AI builder model today, it's one model per library.
Okay, so if you had multiple things in that library, you'd only be able to automate one metadata task.
One document type, basically for that library. Now, the next example I'm going to show you is a little bit more generalized, but that AI builder specific one, the last I checked, it was one model per library. So we would have one model for the purchase order library. Then we might have another library that might be for invoices, or another common example is maybe there are multiple suppliers you have, and maybe invoice from supplier 1 is library 1, invoice from supplier 2 is library 2, because those models are fundamentally different, because vendor A gives you a different invoice than vendor B does. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Great. So this is the other examples, right? So this is a case where we might have documents that may not be as well structured. This might be the statement of work document. This might be the legal contract. This might be that tower agreement that customer is looking at to pull out, how long is our contract going to be there? Let's see, looks like another question before I move on. David, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that, stuck on mute. So that then begs a question, because I can definitely see that becoming a potential for library sprawl, meaning I need to have a library per different type of document type versus having a library that may have similar document types. Do you see, and that could potentially span out, spiral outward. Do you see that there's a possibility around being able to have a auto classification attached to a content type instead, especially for example, you're using POs, or another one would be loan documents in a banking scenario, or a contract in multiple firms. Would it be possible to actually connect that artificial intelligence for this auto classification to content types instead, and have it in a centralized location drawn in the because you did talk about that from a perspective of hubs being able to disseminate content types, so that way the wheel only has to be invented once.
Yeah, that's what this next scenario is going to get a bit into, and this is the piece that is really focused around the knowledge center or content center. But this example, David, might be a little bit more applicable for kind of that broader use case you're thinking. Cool. So thank you for the setup, David. Always my straight man. So I appreciate that. So cool. So here's the content center, the knowledge center. You notice that we have different classifiers that have been built. As we're going through this example, again, we've created different entities. So this is a contract service, the contract company, the value, et cetera. If you remember back in the day with like FAST, we've had the idea around entity extraction and being able to promote metadata and really doing it at the search engine level. It's similar in kind of concept to that. In this case, here's a contract as a classifier. So the way these things got built is we uploaded multiple documents. And in this case, rather than training it specifically by taking a document and going through AI Builder and mapping fields, we're leveraging things like we've had available inside of Azure Search for a while, where we can say, we're going to look for certain terms or phrases. These terms and phrases could be case sensitive or not. We're also going to do things maybe looking up for proximity. So if we find the word this, we find the word agreement, we find XYZ, and we're going to upload a bunch of documents that are positive examples for the model, and we're going to upload some documents that are negative examples of documents that don't match this trainable classifier that we're building. Then as we go through this again, we can say, okay, this is the agreement thing. We're going to look for this phrase, the phrase maybe. To the question earlier, it could be case sensitive. It could not be case sensitive. So you could say, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. But back to the word like core as an example, maybe you want to say core has to be case sensitive. It has to be in uppercase because core is too much of a general word. One way you could do it could be by saying it has to look for this word and the word has to be all uppercase as a way of classifying it. Then as we go through, we then will go in and point it at a document library as the source that we want to go through and scan. Again, over time, we can start to say, once we develop these content types or these entity extractors, then having the ability to then, again, point them potentially at multiple existing sites or libraries. So David, you wouldn't necessarily have to have that sprawl of purpose-built document libraries that are out there. Now, when we do that, then people will upload the documents. In this case, it's a bunch of Word docs. We drop them in. In this case, we're looking at this consulting agreement. And as it's going through and it's reviewing and it's processing, it then knows how to go through, look at those documents. And just like you saw before, it can go ahead and extract the metadata based on specific words. Again, specific like proximity. So if it finds this word within so many characters of another word, which again is something that is pretty challenging if you think about just looking at regular documents. So how do we know when to pull in an amount? How do we know when to pull in a terms of a contract? Is it net 30? Is it net 60? Is it net 90? Really, it's sometimes based off of the proximity of other words as well. Let's see if there's a question there. Thank you. I can stop hyperventilating or ventriculating. Yep. So as we look at, again, same idea as before, we look at here's the document. And again, here are the columns, here are the metadata that got promoted from the document as well. Now, these terms and these content types that we're building, so in this example, a content type, to your point, David, could be a funding document. It could be a contract. The cool thing with that is once we have that concept, as we think about things around security and compliance, applying retention policies, applying security labels, not only can we use the built-in 100 or so sensitive types like credit card numbers, so security numbers, not only can we build our own custom types, we can now potentially start to leverage these content types as we're building rules for applying things like information protection policies, retention labels, et cetera. And it looks like there is another question. Christine.
Yeah. Hey, Chris. Now, quick question on the support with respect to multilingual capabilities, especially in terms of the modeling. Would that stem from multiple taxonomies in the term store, Microsoft Search, combination of thereof, in terms of supporting the documents coming from multiple languages?
Yeah, it's a good question. My recollection, and again, I could be wrong, and this could have changed. I think this is going to be English only to start. So kind of like some of the other things, unfortunately, starting with a single language. As you probably know, we just recently rolled out multilingual with modern SharePoint to enable the ability to at least have a workflow for creating and updating things based on multiple languages. But my understanding is initially this will really be focused upon English, and then eventually expanding out into multilingual because of some of the complexities and challenges that you mentioned. So I think it's really focused on minimal viable product, which again is single language to start, and then looking at other languages over time. Again, that's my last recollection as of the last time I heard. Cool. And then again, similar to applying these labels, using these content types for applying labels for retention policies and data governance policies, also using these content types potentially to apply sensitivity labels to drive data loss prevention, encryption, conditional access, as you probably have seen, driving conditional or limited access based on the label of the content. And then again, giving visibility into usage and analytics, pulling in some of that into the file plans we're creating for retention as well. So this is, again, kind of bringing it back together. Again, we've talked a lot about how we're thinking about bringing together connecting people and topics, some of the manual as well as automated capabilities for content classification and tagging, as well as how we can then extend that with security and compliance. So some of the best practices that we're seeing with customers that are preparing for Project Cortex. One of the things will be initially, this will really be focused around content that's been ingested already into Microsoft 365. So really focused on applying these rules and all that to content that's been ingested. As I mentioned, we are working with Microsoft Search, both first-party and third-party connectors to enable you to crawl and index content outside of Microsoft 365. But my understanding, again, the last I heard is that initially that content won't be part of Project Cortex, but that's something that is top of mind. Also, certainly continue your migration from classic sites to modern sites and modern pages, and go in and review and revise your taxonomy. The managed metadata service, you may or may not have been giving that a lot of love. You might not have been thinking about your taxonomy because maybe you're having some challenges with leveraging the existing taxonomy and managed metadata service, but really go through, review, revisit, revise your content, your term store to make sure that you're ready for this as well. So here's that logical architecture again. This is a bit on kind of the roadmap. So available soon. Some of these things have already come out. So I mentioned Microsoft Search being available, having public previews for some of the, again, Microsoft first party and custom connectors. I've been doing some work right now around search extensibility in Microsoft Search. So again, having the ability to build your own search verticals and kind of page layouts and custom search results pages. I've seen that in my preview tenant. Increasing the number of term sets in the managed metadata service up to 1 million. So really, really large scale term sets has been something that, again, large companies have been looking for. Early 2020, again, this is the stuff that's coming soon, probably in the summertime frame. Again, focus on the improvements we started to roll out already around the new taxonomy and content services. And then you'll start to see more around the topic cards and pages, the content understanding, which is really the AI builder type example that I showed you. And then start to see Microsoft Search getting promoted into the SharePoint search experience, the OneDrive search experience, classic search sites getting Microsoft Search as well. Starting to bring in the ability to do more with customizing the search experience. Over time, bringing in video. So imagine, again, video that's done speech to text inside of Stream, getting the ability to eventually start to search over that. Having the conversations as a search vertical. Right, we used to have today the documents vertical, the people vertical, having conversations as a vertical in search, and including the ability to again bring in audio and video, including things that are being stored inside of Word documents. And then things that are top of mind, so things that will probably come in after the initial wave this summer, we'll be doing more with the topic card pages, enhancing the business process and the ability to do the automatic classification, including the integration of that with the retention labels, the ability to extend this with third-party extensibility, those knowledge, those APIs I was mentioning, and then the ability to, again, have additional search customization inside of SharePoint in OneDrive as well. So if you're looking to get more information on Project Cortex, there is a dedicated page that I'm going to break out of this demo, these slides, and show you real quick. So if you haven't seen this yet, get that pesky little search bar out of the way. Does not want to go away. So I'm going to do it old school. All right, there it goes. So if you go to that site, this is the Project Cortex public landing page. When you go on this page, you'll see that there's some links to things we've done at Build. There's a newsletter you can sign up for to get news and announcements from Chris and the team. If you click into this Project Cortex office hours, this is a series that they've been running, they being the product team, so Chris and Naomi and their teams, really going back to March. These sessions were done over live events. They were recorded. You can go back and you can watch these on demand. So going back to March, there was an overview. They then went through a bit of an FAQ, a little bit more on readiness and getting ready for Cortex. They walked through a lot of the knowledge experiences. I attended this session back in May around what we're doing with the managed metadata service. And then in June, we just did a session around administration and configuration of Project Cortex, the new admin roles, the new user roles, as well as search. And then coming this summer in July, there'll be some updates and news from things we're announcing at Microsoft Inspire, which is our partner conference and Microsoft Field Conference. And then in August, back to one of the questions, there will be a session around building the business case for Project Cortex as well. So you can download the invites right now. It just adds it as a calendar item. Again, they're going to be live events that Chris and the team will be broadcasting. But again, there's already been 6 of these office hours run by the product team. You can go back and watch any of these on demand, as well as stay up to date through the newsletter, as well as go ahead and watch those sessions coming this summer. So there's some comments there. Okay, cool. So with that, I think that is all of the content that I pulled in. And again, this is just a link to Project Cortex as well as the overall content services information. So I know I've been taking a ton of Q&A throughout the session. I've been trying to monitor the chat. But before I hand things back to Dimitri and David and Mike to kind of get into the wrap up and the general Q&A and information sharing, I wanted to pause for a couple of minutes and see if there are any other questions or any feedback that you have either on the presentation or Project Cortex as a whole. So I'll kind of open up the floor for your feedback and questions.
I know
yeah, Christine, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, hey, thanks, Chris. This was great. In the to align with many of the other Microsoft products, will there be a dedicated quote unquote user voice for Project Cortex once it's in GA?
Yeah, that would be my assumption. Project Cortex is really not just a feature inside of SharePoint or Teams. It really is a excuse me, a concept and an entity of its own. Project Cortex is still a code name, so there'll be something new, I'm sure, that will be replacing that as a code name. That was the code name we used when we launched this at Ignite. But yeah, I would expect, because it is a new service built on top of a lot of existing services, SharePoint being one of them, I would expect them to have their own channel in user voice to continue to curate feedback from customers. I know there's a user voice channel for Microsoft Search as an example, and I would expect a similar feedback channel would exist for Project Cortex on its own.
Okay.
Yep. Great question. David, did you have a question or a comment?
No, I just wanted to alert you to, there's a couple of questions in the chat as well.
Okay. Do you want to
sure, I'll
call my attention? Yeah.
Patrick is asking, will metadata be dynamically updated when the end user makes changes to an existing document based on the existing model and entities?
Okay, let me think about that. So I'm reading it now, so let me just process that. Will it be dynamically updated when the user... So is the question, so make sure I understand. So we have a document and the document gets modified. Is the question, will it be rerun through the model and then make any changes to the prior metadata that it had? Is that the question, Patrick? Yes. Okay. Yep. That's a good question. I don't know. I would assume it would be, but I honestly don't know because I haven't tried it. One of the things I can see would be a potential concern is that once it runs through the model, and we promote things to metadata, we do still make the columns editable for a human to go in and modify it. I would just be concerned about potentially the model overriding what a human did to the metadata itself. But again, that's just my opinion. I don't know for certain. It's a great question, though.
It's going to be interesting concerning the fact that a lot of times the index, you can have old documents. Scott Jameson loved doing stuff like that. Yeah, you're nodding your head because you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you can search for things that have been deleted for a while because a full index hasn't been done. And doing a full index in the online environment can be challenging.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things. If you get a chance, catch some of the Microsoft Search stuff that Bill Bear and team have been doing. Microsoft Search is not just SharePoint Search, Fast Search. It is us taking literally the best of our search across Azure Search, Bing Search, which has been used externally for many, many years for consumers, Exchanges Search, and SharePoint Search, and Team Search, and Yammer Search, and basically taking the best of all of those search platforms and building what we really consider to be a cloud scale search engine. Whereas if you think about SharePoint and Fast Search, yeah, they were good, they were scalable, but they initially were built for on-premises, where the amount of content and the corpus of content was really focused typically on a single customer, compared to the cloud, where we now have 7 years worth of customers in the cloud with large amounts of cloud data. You're really approaching cloud scale search, which is something that Bing has done a great job at, similar to what Google and other, consumer cloud grade search engines have been doing. So I would expect, David, as part of it, some of the latency challenges we've seen before with crawling and indexing would be addressed as part of this new Microsoft Search platform being built upon the Bing Foundation and some of the other, again, enterprise cloud grade, cloud scale search engines as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to hang on. Certainly, I can take some questions later if it's there, but I do want to be respectful that I think this is scheduled to go to 8, and as I mentioned, it's my 20th anniversary, so I want to do my best to get back to my wife and our kids and make sure that she's still here. Although I did get her 24 flowers, so I think I'm in good graces. I got her 12 flowers per decade. They said, if you can stay with me for 20 years, you don't just deserve 1 dozen, you're going to get 12 per decade. So those got delivered earlier this afternoon. So I was smart enough to kind of soften the blow of me being on the line with you all tonight.
Well, tell Mrs. B that we appreciate her sharing you for this evening.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having me. So, Dimitri, I'm going to throw myself on mute, and again, I'll let you all take control back.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate your coming out and presenting this today. I think, as always, great job, and thank you. So between Mike and Dave, who wants to take over the slides for the closeout?
Dave, you can take it.
Sure, why not? Dimitri, if you could go ahead and throw them up there for you.
All right, well, I'll just move forward with them. So upcoming community events. As you can probably imagine, there's not a whole lot of in-person events happening, but the Microsoft Ignite conference is going to be online only this September. I'm not sure if registrations have been completely opened yet, but if not, there's an ability to at least pre-register and input your name on the list. There's also a monthly Women's IT Pros call available at the link here, and that is also an online event. That being said, does anyone know of any other online events that are happening anytime in the near future? I see a hand from Christine. Christine, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I had actually unmuted myself, but then I accidentally muted. So, yeah, I actually just got a notification that the M365 Philly that had been originally scheduled in May, but of course postponed due to COVID, is proceeding as a virtual event in July. And I believe it's going to overlap one day with the Inspire event. I think it's either the 21st or 22nd. But if you go to SPS events, you'll be able to see it. But it's a virtual event, the Philly one.
Right. Oh. And Christine, did you say that was a SharePoint Saturday?
Yeah, it's a share. Oh, actually, hold on. It might be on the dynamic. If it's not on the SDS events website, it'll be on the dynamic community one for the M365 Saturday. But it's on one of them. It was originally scheduled for May. It's now proceeding as a virtual event in July. It's either the 21st or the 22nd. Philly. It's the Philly one. Yeah.
Excellent.
And of course, as Chris said, there is the Inspire for all the partners in the room. All you got to do is put your MPNI and D number, and you're in. I already registered.
Yeah, there's also one that AppPoint I think is running next week. They've had their Shift Happens conference. That I know is online, and I just got a message from Dux that I think I want to say it's like for every person that attends, they're going to donate $5 per attendee to COVID relief, I believe. So they're doing certainly their event, which has been an in-person event, I think in DC in the past. They've moved it online, and I believe there's a charitable part of it as well that AppPoint will be donating money to a charity. Again, I want to say it's COVID relief related, although it could be something else that the Ducks and them are running, I think, next week.
Great, thanks, Chris. I see Deb has her hand up as well.
Yeah, I've been watching the GlobalCon 2 this week. They've got, I'm going to put a link in the chat. You can still buy the videos. There's one more day of videos left. It's free if you watch it live. I think it's $139 for the video. It's been really good. There was a presentation about Project Cortex, about the new SharePoint lists. Today was about Azure in the afternoon. In the morning, it was all about Stream. So I've been finding it really helpful when I've had the time to actually pay attention to it. So I'm looking forward to watching the videos later.
Awesome. That's great. And for those that are sharing events, if you could put them into the chat window, the rest of the team can see them as well then. And I see, Mike, you have your hand up. Mr. Dixon?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I believe the event that Chris was talking about at the beginning of the session, the Office 365 Marathon, all of the videos for that, even though that event is over, all of the videos for that are available to watch. And that's a fantastic event.
You're correct. They will be putting them up on YouTube as well. However, because it was done as anonymous, so it was public level live events. Those links are going to be good because the VODs were turned on for 90 days. So all of those are definitely available, and they're working on actually putting them up onto YouTube as well.
Excellent. All right. So thanks for those updates. Moving forward, we just want to give a quick shout out to some of our brother and sister user groups in the area. DRC Hess runs a great user group down in Rhode Island that has also moved to a virtual platform amid COVID. We have the Hartford Office 365 user group run by Jared. Those meetings tend to coincide with our meetings, so we don't really recommend it unless you're in the area and want to go there in person when they open back up. We have the Granite State SharePoint user group hosted by Julie Turner and Jim Wilcox. They've also moved to an online platform given recent times. And a few others in the area that are related technologies where if you're interested, it's definitely worthwhile to check them out. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about next month. So we do this once a month, and we have a great session from Joel Olson next month, along with the team that just recently ran the conference that everyone has been talking about. They're going to give us a bit of an insight for what it takes to put on an online conference using Microsoft Teams and talk a little bit about their experiences, what worked well, what challenges they faced, and how they overcame them. So we're still working with them to come up with an adequate session title to describe the event. But keep an eye out for that. It'll be same time on July 16th, the third Thursday of the month. And we're really looking forward to hosting them for that session.
I'm totally pushing for M365 Virtual Marathon of Doom. No, just kidding.
All right. So that being said, being a SharePoint and O365 community in general here, does anyone have any problems that they'd like to talk with the team about here? Any kind of tips? Is anyone in the hiring or looking for work? This is your time. Please feel free to unmute yourselves. No need to raise the hands. Just go ahead and chime in.
Hey, this is Chrissy. I actually have a pro tip that it was always there, but it's not turned on by default, and it's within Word. And in terms of the within the editor and the proofing and the grammar settings, the bias for Word to scan for any bias terms, you can check that off in your settings. It's not on by default, so then that way, whatever you're composing will be the most inclusive. So if, does everyone know how to get to the editor in Word? Yeah. Yes. Nope.
I do.
Very funny, Chris. Well, this was this was actually a couple of weeks ago that I think I remember seeing a tweet out from Joanne Klein, about that, and it was like, oh my God. So then I checked my own, well, not in terms about the setting, but then I went to check my own settings, and it's not turned on by default. So you would think it'd be turned on by default. Hint, hint. No, kidding. But for those that actually, when you want to invoke your grammar and spell check, and for it to check those bias terms, perhaps maybe invoke that. And it's really easy to turn on. If you actually just go into your editor, or just go into your options and go into proofing, go in there, and then just pull up your settings and just scroll the list for the section on inclusivity, and just basically just check everything off. So, and especially during these times, I think it's more and more important that we use the proper communications for unbiased communications.
Great tip, Christine. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Lisa, go ahead.
So I'm on a Mac, and I have not found that. Do you know if it's available for Mac?
Hi, Lisa. Are you talking about the inclusive? That's a great question. Yes. I'm a PC. Perhaps that might be a good question for Chris. Sorry, Chris.
No, it's okay. I don't know either. I also only use a Windows device as well as an iOS device, and I don't know if it's on the Mac or not. But if it's not, I would definitely put that feedback in user voice.
Okay. What about online?
I haven't tried it online either.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Is anyone looking for work, or is anyone hiring? Silence there is usually a good thing. Well, at least means everyone's well employed. It's always glad to hear that.
I'm still pending, so I am looking.
Okay. Paul, could you give us a little bit of background in terms of what kind of roles you're looking for?
Probably be general network admin, help desk manager, end user support, application support.
Great.
I've got about 30 years IT experience, so.
Awesome. If anyone knows anyone looking to hire, please reach out to Paul. He's a member of our user group here. And if anyone has any challenges ever contacting anyone else as part of the group, just reach out to any one of us organizers, and we'd be happy to put you in touch.
Oh,
you went on mute, Dimitri.
All right. So sorry. I was just saying, if anyone needs to speak.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Can I add actually one more thing? And this is actually along the lines of unbiased communications. I don't know if you guys saw Tom Ressing's tweet call to actions the past couple of days, but him and Jonathan Lightfoot are taking on the initiative and going through the various both Microsoft documentations and software and reviewing them for bias communications. And they're calling out to the community for people to actually help. I've actually signed on to help, but they're looking, but the more the merrier. So the repository is on GitHub, but if you want more information, just find Tom's tweet and just respond to his tweets. I think it's only Tom been tweeting about it and Jonathan's been responding, but I don't think Jonathan's been tweeting about it. So search for Tom. Tom Rustin's out of the Washington office. Redmond? Wait, is that right? Yeah. Thanks. Okay, I see Chris nodding his head. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Thanks, Christine. And I see Mike has his hand up as well.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Sorry, Chris, that I was late. Happy anniversary. I did have a hiring question. I'm working with Dave Feldman at Takeda, and he is looking to hire somebody to run DevOps. So if you are or know anybody with great experience in GitHub, continuous integration, continuous development, and really not just executing DevOps, but building a DevOps function, talk to me, talk to Dave Feldman. If you know Dave, I'd be happy to make an introduction. It's a very specific hire, but I figure the more eyeballs, the better chance we have.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And for everyone else that's attending this session, if you ever want to be put in touch with anybody else that's attending any of these sessions, just shoot us a message to any one of the organizers and we can help put you in touch. I know this is especially helpful when people are mentioning they're looking for work or looking to hire. We like to connect people as much as possible. Okay. Does anyone have any other problems, questions, tips, hiring questions?
I've got plenty of problems.
Okay, well, we'll save that for the happy hour following directly after this.
I'll vouch for him.
I have one short question, if I may.
Go ahead, Arthur.
And first, congratulate Chris. Happy to see that he rose to the occasion for the anniversary with the flowers. We have a new company. They're sending email from forms from their website to an address at the company, and everything goes into spam. Is there anything to look for or a setting?
Yeah, I'm gonna paste the setting. I'm gonna paste what the terms to look up into. It's called DMARC and DKIM. Essentially, when somebody receives an email message from anywhere, a lot of times there's a reverse lookup done to see if the IP address that the email originated from matches a safe sender list. And you publish that safe sender list as part of your DNS for your domain name. So in the scenario where you might have MailChimp, you might have whatever the website poster is sending on behalf of that domain, there basically just needs to be their IP or domain name added to your safe senders in your MX record. So look up the two terms that I pasted below. Microsoft has a great support article explaining how you can do that to extend beyond your 365 domain.
Okay, where's that pasted?
In the chat window here.
Okay.
Which also reminds me, we actually also have to apply those settings for our Boston 0365 emails that might be ending up in some of your spam folders.
Okay. Also on that same topic, Microsoft actually has a partnership with a company called Valley Mail that's offering free services to any company that's running Office 365 for DMARC and DKIM monitoring. So that's worth checking out. That's Valley Mail, spelled VALIMAIL. I'll put it in the chat.
Awesome. I see we have a question from Dana Black.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I want to thank you first for a great presentation. This is my first one. David invited me, and I popped on, and I think it's a great use and investment of my time. I do appreciate it. What I wanted to ask was, will I be, just by being here, will my presence be on a list that I'll be kept informed of upcoming meetings like this, or do I need to actually go and officially enroll as an Office user?
Great question. We can probably do a better job to add attendees to our mailing list, but we don't do that very often. If you go to our website, which is boston0365usergroup.com, I think Mike could probably put that in the chat. We have a newsletter sign up link that you can just enter your email address, and then you'll receive all future communications.
I will do that. Thank you. It'll be done. And I would also, if I can make a brief aside, say hello to Paul. Great to see you, buddy. You're looking great. I love the quarantine beard, and good, really good to see you.
What you're missing is the dark brown hair.
Well, I'm missing all hair, so it's just kind of a relative thing. But anyway, thank you very much, everybody. I really enjoyed this forum and the content. And I'm probably going to join a lot more often because then it'll make everybody feel a lot smarter if I'm here. So I do appreciate it, everybody. Thanks very much.
Great. Thanks, Dana. I see Deb has her hand up as well.
Yeah, we've had an issue recently with caching issues. Now, typically it's Google Chrome and you've got to clear the cache in Chrome. But I had one of my end users, she opened up the document, it was an earlier version. And so we wound up looking it up and doing the Office Upload Center and found out that there's a cache in Office 365. I'm looking at my little news post here on my other screen. And it turns out you have to, it looks like this seems to work. You set your days to keep files in Office document cache. It looks like it's defaulted at 14. We set it to 1 and the problem went away. So it's interesting. We've had this happen with a couple of people right around the same day. It was around June 9th, June 10th. A bunch of people had issues where two people were in the latest version and one other person couldn't get the latest version. They were seeing an earlier version. And clearing out the cache in Chrome didn't solve the issue. This did.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen that. I don't know if others have.
All right. Thought I'd check.
All right. Well, thank you for that tip. So, so shortly after this raffle, we can all stay on and have a beverage and